If you had to fight Godzilla with only a few leftover weapons and a positive attitude, what would you do? This pilot had his entire world turned upside down when Godzilla suddenly attacked his base. And after nuclear tests made the monster even more powerful, he's gonna have to find a way to stop him before he turns the entire country into a scrapyard. We're here to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat Revenge Godzilla in Godzilla -1. On an island somewhere far out in the Pacific Ocean, Japanese fighter pilot Koichi Shikishima is forced to make an emergency landing. It's the last days of the Second World War, but tonight, the enemy army isn't what they should be afraid of. Koichi here claims that he was forced to turn back because of engine trouble, but when the lead mechanic Tachibana and his boys take a look under the hood, they quickly report back that they couldn't find anything wrong. Confronting him, Tachibana suggests that the real reason why he turned around was because he wasn't ready for the kamikaze pilot final quest. Knowing that what the man's saying is true, Koichi goes down to sit by the water in shame. It isn't until after dark that Koichi risks showing his face back at the base again. But as soon as he gets there, the air raid siren starts to go off. Tachibana and his men rush outside to see what's going on, but find no other signs that they're under enemy attack. Until, from somewhere out there in the darkness, they hear a terrifying roar that stops them all dead in their tracks. This is no air raid, and Tachibana orders the men in the watchtower to turn the spotlight towards the source of the noise, when all of a sudden, he's completely obliterated by an enormous reptilian monster who the local legends call Godzilla. Terrified, the rest of the men instantly run for their lives, scrambling for the safety of a nearby trench and taking cover behind the piled-up sandbags. As Godzilla stalks through the camp searching for them, Tachibana comes up with a plan to have Koichi run for his plane and use the heavy weapons on board to take the monster down. Nervous, Koichi carefully sneaks around the outside of the camp and climbs into the cockpit of his fighter, with his hand gripping the trigger. He waits until Godzilla is perfectly within his sights, but he's still too afraid to take the shot. Suddenly, one of the other soldiers fires a shot straight at Godzilla's snout, and that was his biggest mistake. You see, the men's weapons hardly have any effect as the monster begins rampaging through the camp, killing one man after another with his massive jaws, and leaving them with nothing that they could possibly do to fight back. As the carnage unfolds all around him, Koichi bails out of his plane just as Godzilla lifts it into the air and tosses it back down like a toy, knocking him unconscious from the force of the explosion. Okay, this was an absolute disaster, and the soldiers' reaction to Godzilla showing up only made things even worse. Now, to be fair, I think that it would be hard to think straight if your camp was suddenly attacked in the middle of the night by a giant monstrosity, unlike anything that you've ever seen before, but the truth is that this entire massacre might have been avoided if they hadn't made a few critical mistakes. Just like always, whether we're dealing with ETs, zombies, or a massive radioactive lizard, the key to surviving the encounter is to understand what exactly we're up against. Baby Zilla here is an enormous, dinosaur-like marine reptile who most closely resembles giant theropods like T-Rex or Spinosaurus. But even that comparison hardly does him justice. Right now, he's standing at nearly 50 feet tall, making him more than twice the size of even the largest Rex or Spino. And this is only his first form. This giant size gives him incredible strength, making him able to plow through watchtowers with ease, take out entire buildings with a single whip of his tail, and lift a 6,000-pound fighter plane dozens of feet into the air like it's made out of cardboard, using his unbelievably powerful jaws. He isn't just an offensive threat either, because his borderline impenetrable natural armor makes him completely impervious to most attacks, and even allows him to withstand military-style heavy weapons, as Tachibana and his men just found out the hard way. Even in his current form, he's already a serious threat, but remember, this is him before the exposure to nuclear radiation causes him to really go crazy, and after that, he's going to have a few more surprise tricks in store for us that somehow make him even more dangerous. Now, one of the most important questions that we need to ask whenever Godzilla shows up is why he chose to attack. In the wild, predators like Godzilla don't just attack for no reason, since any violent battle comes with the risk of them being injured too. One possible explanation could be that he was hunting them for food. But we can see that this isn't the case, since Godzilla actually had a couple of the soldiers in his mouth at different points during the attack, but only chose to throw them away instead of chomping them up like that guy on the porta potty in the first Jurassic Park. If we rule that out, then the other most likely explanation here is that Godzilla was only defending his territory. The increasing human activity in the area due to the war probably stressed the big lizard out and caused him to come investigate what was going on here on the island. He most likely saw the humans as a rival species competing for control of his territory, and Kochi, Takibana, and the others here were just the unlucky chumps who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time when Godzilla finally decided to do something about it. This brings us to another critical turning point in the encounter. Although he definitely didn't come in peace, Godzilla here didn't actually go into full-blown attack mode until he was provoked. Just like any other species, it's natural that Godzilla would have become more aggressive when he perceived that he was being directly threatened. We can see this in how he demolished the tower when they shined that spotlight on him, but then just went back to wandering around and checking the place out until someone got too jumpy and opened fire. Thinking about it logically, a handful of tiny humans wouldn't be much of a threat to this beast, which means that if they'd just avoided provoking him any further, then everyone besides the unfortunate guy in the watchtower might have survived. Again, this is made clear in the moment where he looked right at Kochi in his plane, but decided to ignore him because the man clearly wasn't a threat. One look at this guy should tell you that attacking him with their rifles would have no effect, and I seriously doubt that even the heavier weapons on Kochi's fighter would have done much more than just piss him off. The truth is that firing at him was the worst mistake that they could possibly have made, and Kochi here was absolutely right not to shoot, even if he chose not to out of fear instead of understanding what was really going on. Why these guys kept firing after it obviously wasn't doing anything besides making Godzilla even more angry is anyone's guess, but if they were absolutely determined to fight it out with him here and now, then they might have stood a tiny chance if they'd taken a slightly more thought-out approach. The key here would be to aim for any potential weak points instead of just randomly firing into his armored skin. That's easier said than done, of course, since it looks like the only exposed parts of his body are Godzilla's eyes. It would have taken one hell of a lucky shot, but if they'd somehow managed to land a critical hit to one of his eyeballs, then they might have damaged his vision enough for everyone to get away, or injured him enough that he decided to leave on his own. By using this strategy, they would have had about the same chances as a group of kindergartners fighting prime Mike Tyson. Not much, but any chance is better than nothing. Even the 20mm cannons on Kochi's planes probably wouldn't have done much, but we could see during the maintenance check that the plane was armed with at least one or two high-powered bombs, designed for taking out enemy warships. And those are the only weapons on the island that might have packed enough of a punch to actually do anything here if they'd used them correctly. These explosives were most likely equipped with impact fuses designed to detonate immediately after hitting their target, which means that if someone were to fire at them with one of their rifles, then they might have been able to make them go off. It looks like they removed the weapons from the plane while they were working on it, but they might have still been around there somewhere. If they could have somehow lured Godzilla into going near the bombs and then hit them with a rifle from a safe distance away, then they might have been able to cause a big enough explosion to either kill him or at least scare him away. Of course, the best bet for your own personal survival is not trying to fight Godzilla at all. Case in point, the only other two guys who actually lived to tell the tale are the ones who stayed the hell out of the way. The best thing for everyone to do would have been to stay right there in the trench and hope that Godzilla eventually either got bored or distracted by something else and just went back into the ocean on his own. Once the hit the fan, I would have tried making a break for the jungle to hide, and used the other guys as meat shields if it came down to it, because remember, you don't have to be faster than Godzilla to get away, you just have to be faster than the guy standing next to you. Unless he whips everyone with his tail or takes out an entire city block with his atomic breath, but you get my point. Attention, attention! Godzilla has been spotted in your area. All personnel, please report to your gaming stations, because it's time to prepare for battle. Good thing we're prepared thanks to today's sponsor, War Thunder. This free-to-play cross-platform behemoth, available on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox, lets you command legendary war machines across massive historical battles. From the scorching deserts to the frozen tundras, you'll decide the fate of nations. Whether you captain a ship, airplane, or tank, War Thunder boasts over 2,500 meticulously detailed vehicles from 10 major nations, each of which has unique vehicle skins to personalize your arsenal. But War Thunder isn't just about collecting cool skins for your vehicles. It lets you experience the evolution of warfare, from the biplanes to the jets and unstoppable main battle tanks of today. These stunning visuals, realistic sound effects, and incredibly detailed vehicles truly put you in the driver's seat. If your vehicle or an enemy is destroyed, War Thunder shows you exactly what happens. In X-ray view, you'll see precisely where the shell penetrated, which components were affected, and ultimately what led to the destruction of the vehicle. Join a thriving community of over 70 million players and embark on epic PvP battles. Whether you're solo or a team player, War Thunder offers a wealth of content for all skill levels. There are even 3 distinct game modes to choose from: Arcade, fast-paced matches with enhanced vehicle performance and simplified physics, perfect for a quick burst of action. Realistic, the perfect middle ground, balancing intensity and authenticity for a truly immersive experience. And Simulator, the ultimate challenge for hardcore players, with no assists and a focus on historical accuracy. Download War Thunder absolutely free today by clicking the link in the description and dive into a world of unmatched action. By joining with my link, new and returning players that haven't played for at least 6 months get a bonus pack to access multiple premium vehicles and an exclusive vehicle decorator. With endless customization options, constant upgrades, and a massive community, War Thunder is the ultimate game for military history fans and anyone who craves the ultimate combat experience. Available on Xbox, PlayStation, and PC. Thanks again to War Thunder for sponsoring today's video. Don't forget to click the link in the video description to join the ever-growing War Thunder community and get a bonus pack to access multiple premium vehicles and an exclusive vehicle decorator. Now let's get back to Godzilla -1. At sunrise the next morning, Kochi wakes up to find Tachibana, the only survivor of the monster's attack, doing what he can to clean up in the aftermath. But when he notices the pilot, he stops what he's doing and turns to confront him. Furious, he blames Kochi for the other men's death, shouting that it's his fault for not taking the shot when he had the chance. By December 1945, Kochi finally arrives back in Tokyo, only to discover that his family home has been completely destroyed by the Allied attacks. His next-door neighbor Sumiko rushes out to see him, but her entire attitude changes when she remembers that he was never supposed to make it home, calling him a coward for not doing his job. The woman tells him that both of his parents and her own 3 children were lost during the attacks, leaving Kochi without a family or a home to go back to, in a city full of people who blame him for everything that's happened. One morning while waiting for his rations, Kochi hears a sudden commotion and turns to see a group of men chasing a thief through the crowded streets. He steps into her path to stop her, but the angry woman hands him a baby girl before disappearing back into the crowd, with the angry merchants still in hot pursuit. Having no idea what to do with the kid, Kochi sits there in the market for a while, until he decides that she isn't coming back. But as soon as he walks away from the crowd, the woman jumps out and thanks him for taking care of the baby girl, saying that she would have come sooner if he hadn't been waiting for her in such a public place. She quickly realizes that Kochi here is a good person at heart, and when she catches on that he has a place to stay, the woman decides that she and her baby are going to tag along, with Kochi being too nice to force them away. Back at his house, Kochi learns that the woman isn't married and that the baby girl isn't even actually hers. The woman says that her name is Noriko, and she began taking care of the child Akko after the girl's mother was lost during one of the attacks. Neither her or the girl have any family left or a place for them to live, and after learning that Kochi's parents were lost as well, she realizes that the three of them are all in the same boat. The news hits Kochi hard, and before he can kick them out, Noriko and her baby quickly drift off to sleep, leaving him no choice but to let them stay for now. Okay, whew, man. Kochi here's life sucks ever since he made it back to Japan. He's got no family, his house is basically a shack, everyone in town hates his guts, and on top of all that, now he has 2 more mouths to feed. He could always kick Noriko and the kid out of there first thing in the morning, but he's too much of a nice guy to put them back on the streets. This means that he needs to find a way to get his act back together fast, and there might actually be a way that he can solve all of these problems at once. As we can see from what happened to Kochi's neighborhood, Japan faced widespread destruction in the months following the war due to Allied campaigns. The destruction was the worst in residential neighborhoods, industrial centers, and areas with important local infrastructure, leaving the entire country struggling for survival. In order to get things back on track, the Japanese government and companies from the private sector engaged in a massive post-war reconstruction campaign that lasted for decades after the end of the fighting, and that's exactly where Kochi here comes into the picture. The rebuilding efforts started with a focus on clearing rubble, repairing basic infrastructure such as roadways and utility services like power plants, water supply systems, sewers, and medical facilities, as well as providing emergency shelter for the countless displaced civilians whose homes had been completely destroyed. These reconstruction teams needed all of the able-bodied workers that they could find, and the laborers were paid for their work through either government contracts or wages from private companies. With that being said, Kochi here could definitely get a job on one of those reconstruction teams, and it shouldn't have been very difficult to find one since they need just about anybody who they can get. Not only would this give him a chance to earn some money to take care of the 3 of them, but it would also help him get some respect back from the people of his community, and possibly help him psychologically move on from the intense trauma that he's been experiencing since returning home. After all, nothing gets your mind off of the voices in your head like some good old-fashioned manual labor, am I right? Of course, Kochi could always just say, "F all that," pack his bags, and go out to live in shame and solitude in the middle of nowhere. And honestly, that would probably be the best call after he sees what's going to happen soon enough. The next morning, Sumiko confronts him about the woman and child, suggesting that he's only letting them stay as a way to make himself look like the good guy. But when she finds out that Noriko isn't the girl's biological mother, she immediately goes over to help them out. After making sure that the child is properly fed, she gives them her last bag of rice so that they can use it to make porridge until they're able to find a way to meet their needs. A few months pass until on one very rainy day in March, Kochi returns home with the news that he managed to find a well-paying job. They even paid him 3,000 yen in advance. But there's just one downside. He's going to be clearing mines out of the ocean, and a lot of people who take this job end up with an early retirement. On his first day, Kochi arrives at the dock to find the boat that he'll be working on looking even more dangerous than he could have imagined. One of the crew, former Navy engineer Doc Noda, welcomes Kochi aboard and introduces him to the others, Captain Akitsu and Shiru the kid. The job works by catching mines on a rope, pulled between 2 boats, and then detonating them with gunfire from a safe distance away. As they clear their first mine, Kochi impresses the others by teaching them how to aim a weapon while accounting for the drift in the waves, using the skills that he'd learned as a fighter pilot. Several months later, the United States begins conducting nuclear tests at Bikini Atoll, but what they don't realize is that they've just awakened Godzilla, and the damage from the radiation causes him to grow even more enormous proportions. Over the rest of the year, Kochi manages to set them up with a pretty nice life using the money that he earns from his new job, but he still refuses to marry Noriko, or fully embrace his role as the child's father figure, despite the other guys from work telling him that he should. Okay, damn. Just when it looked like Kochi here was finally starting to get his life back together, here comes old Godzilla about to spin the block on his ass once again. This time around, it's the Americans who just woke up the sleeping giant, and the worst part is that they're not even going to lift a finger to help when he shows up. Thanks for nothing, I guess. If you think that Godzilla here was nightmare fuel before, just wait until you get a look at him after his radioactive glow-up. Somehow, the exposure to unprecedented levels of radiation from the nuclear tests cause him to mutate into the most terrifying creature that the planet has ever seen. Alright, so he was pretty much that already, but now there's absolutely no competition. After being exposed to the radiation, Godzilla here is now standing at nearly 165 feet tall and weighing in at approximately 20,000 tons. Anyone would admit that this makes him a bit of a short king compared to some of our other modern Gojis that are out there. He's still big enough to knock over entire apartment buildings like a little kid's fort. And as a side effect of the radiation, he's just unlocked 2 overpowered new abilities that somehow make him even more terrifying: his signature atomic breath and extremely enhanced regeneration. Now, instead of having to body slam Tokyo the old-fashioned way, his atomic breath gives him a long-ranged attack option that's capable of creating a nuclear explosion so powerful that it can instantaneously convert solid iron into gas at the point of contact, and a resulting shockwave that can completely destroy everything within a 4-mile radius, except for the buildings that the main characters are hiding behind, or the boats that they're currently sailing on. As for his enhanced regeneration, he can now survive injuries that would be a death sentence for any other creature, and heal his wounds almost instantly. There's no telling when the big guy might come back for round 2, but if there's one thing that we can be sure of, it's that fighting him just became much more difficult than it already was. Just from his sheer size alone, he can level entire city blocks without any trouble. So to say that they're going to need to break out the heavy artillery for the next battle would be the understatement of the century. The worst part is that Japan's military is already virtually non-existent after the end of the war, and none of the other countries are willing to help them out at all. The next time that Godzilla shows up, they'll have to hit him from long range with every that's left in the country. And even then, he's just going to take them out with his nuclear blast. At this point, the only way to stop Godzilla is going to be to hit him with something so powerful that it completely overwhelms his regeneration, or come up with another way to cancel out his healing factor altogether. We'll get into some ideas for that the next time that he shows up, and it isn't going to be much longer before Godzilla and Kochi meet again. In March 1947, Kochi arrives at home to find that Noriko got herself a desk job in the nearby district of Ginza, saying that Sumiko promised to take care of the girl so that she can save up enough money for them to eventually move out on their own. Noriko herself is excited to get started, but Kochi tries his best to hide the fact that he's secretly heartbroken to see the only family that he's had since the war getting ready to leave him behind. Meanwhile, Godzilla sets off on a direct course for Japan, destroying any warships that come across his path. The US warns them that the creature is headed their way, but says that it won't be able to offer any military help due to fears of escalating tensions with the Soviet Union, leaving the already crippled Japanese forces to fend for themselves. One day, Kochi and his crew are sent to investigate a destroyed ship far out at sea. The others start to wonder what could have caused so much damage, and that's when Kochi tells them about his encounter with Godzilla back during the war, saying that, from the look of things, it seems like the creature has only gotten bigger and more dangerous since he last saw it. Doc then explains that they've just been sent out there as meat shields to stall the creature however they can until a real Japanese warship is able to take over, and that they've been told to keep this a secret from the public so that they don't end up causing widespread panic. Kochi tries to tell the captain that they need to get the hell out of there while they still have the chance, but instead he gives a rousing speech about how they need to stand their ground for the people back home. All of a sudden, Godzilla surfaces and effortlessly drags their sister boat under the waves with his massive jaws, causing the captain here to immediately change his mind as he pushes up on the throttle and sends them full speed ahead back towards the safety of dry land. With Godzilla closing in behind them, the crew get ready to use the only weapons that they have, the giant mines that they were originally sent to destroy. They drop one into Godzilla's path and detonate it using a remote trigger, but the blast does nothing besides piss him off even more. And that's when Doc gets an idea and drops a second mine directly into Godzilla's open mouth, But this time, the detonator doesn't work. At the last moment, Kochi manages to land the shot, causing an explosion that nearly sinks their boat. The blast seems like it did the job, blowing a massive hole in Godzilla's upper jaw, but to their horror, the creature actually regenerates from the wound within seconds and goes right back on the attack like nothing happened. Just then, the battleship that they've been waiting for finally shows up, attacking Godzilla with a barrage of heavy weapons. As Godzilla redirects his attention towards the ship, they're able to knock him off with a few more close-range shots. But just when it looks like they've actually won, the ocean around them begins to glow blue as he unleashes a blast of his atomic breath, vaporizing the entire battleship before disappearing back into the sea. Okay, I think that Kochi here is gonna need a bigger boat, or maybe a fucking Megazord if we're keeping it real, but we'll work with whatever we can get. That shit was close, and they're just lucky that Godzilla went after the other crew first. But on the positive side, we did learn some important lessons that might help Kochi and his friends here out in a bit in the next fight. Now that Godzilla's had his power boosted by the atomic energy, we can see that attacking him from the outside, even with the massive weapons on a full-sized warship, is almost completely useless, and will only work to momentarily stun him at best. With that being said, we learned that attacks from the inside work to at least slow him down, so it's possible that they might actually be able to kill him this way if they do enough damage. Even with Godzilla's healing factor, a bigger boom from inside might have stopped him. Kochi's only chance is to use the mines. According to Doc here, both sides dropped something like 60k of these forbidden Kinder eggs into the waters around Japan during the war. The most common types used were known as contact mines, like the ones that they were cleaning up here. And the way that they work is pretty simple. Something hits it and it blows that thing up. We saw that just one was enough to take off half of Godzilla's face from the inside, so maybe 5 or 10 of them, used in a similar way, could multiply that effect. When Godzilla attacked the first boat, he came up from below the surface like a shark and chomped into it with his jaws. With any luck, Kochi and the others might have been able to decoy the boat out and trick him into repeating the same move. But this time, the boat is loaded up with a bunch of these mines. Then they can either use the force from Godzilla's chomp, a detonator switch, or a lucky shot from Kochi to set them off, and hopefully do enough damage to take Godzilla down for a little while longer. The biggest hole in this plan would be if he destroyed the decoy boat with his atomic breath, but it's important to remember that his use of that ability is limited because he'll need to recharge it every time. He might not use it on something that he doesn't perceive as a great enough of a threat, so one of these minesweeper boats should work just fine. Now, even that mine exploding directly inside of his head only managed to stop him for a few seconds, so if they're going to take him down for good, then they're probably going to need to find a way to cancel out his regenerative abilities. The best solution would be to collect a sample of his body if anything got blown off during the attack, study it to learn what gives Godzilla this ability, and then reverse engineer a way to defeat it. Like, I'm not a molecular scientist, but in case you couldn't tell, after doing some research, I've managed to come up with a handful of ideas that seem like they could possibly work. One solution could be to use extreme cold by finding a way to force feed Godzilla tons of liquid nitrogen, which could cause the ice crystals to form from within his cells and cancel out their ability to repair themselves. Another strategy could be for the big brains to come up with some kind of chemical compound that targets their specific cellular processes that make this rapid regeneration possible and shut them down. Finally, they might try developing a specialized virus or type of bacteria that could also produce the same effect, and using a type of aerosol to introduce it into Godzilla's bloodstream. Whatever they do, they need to stop him soon because Godzilla here is out for blood, and he's coming for the city of Tokyo next. Sometime later, Kochi wakes up in the hospital surrounded by the rest of his crew. He immediately freaks out, saying that they need to warn the public that Godzilla is coming. But Doc explains that they've been told to keep quiet about what they saw because nobody wants to be responsible for the chaos of a sudden evacuation. Later that night, Noriko pleads with Kochi to tell her what happened out there, saying that she knows that he's been hiding something from her over all of these years. Through struggling breaths, he confesses that he only managed to survive the war because he lied about his plane being damaged, and tells her about the night at the base when Godzilla attacked, but he was too afraid to fire. After failing to stop the creature for a second time, he's beginning to feel like this is his curse for not dying during the war like he was supposed to. But Noriko reassures him that just being here is proof that he was meant to survive. Kochi falls asleep, still troubled by his past, but in the morning he speaks to the spirits of his parents and says that he's finally ready to start a new life. That same day, Kochi is at home with Akiko when the air raid siren starts to sound, and an emergency broadcast over the radio announces that Godzilla has just unexpectedly made landfall in Ginza, where Noriko is currently at work. In the city, people are already scrambling for cover as Godzilla begins rampaging through the streets, destroying anything in his path. Noriko herself is peacefully riding along the train, completely unaware of any danger, when suddenly another flying rail car crashes directly into the tracks in front of them, forcing them to make an abrupt stop. Looking out the window, she's shocked to see Godzilla stomping straight towards them as the people on the ground run for their lives. As he reaches the train, the creature clamps down onto it with his jaws, hoisting the entire thing 150 feet up into the air. Noriko manages to hold on for dear life as the rest of the car that she's riding in suddenly splits away, leaving her dangling helplessly over a fall to certain death. Luckily, Godzilla turns until she realizes that she's hanging above a canal, and with no other choice, she lets herself drop down into the water below, narrowly avoiding being crushed by the rest of the train as it falls behind her. As the rampage continues, Noriko pulls herself onto dry land, only to find that she's right back in Godzilla's path of destruction. Too stunned to do anything, she's accidentally knocked over by the fleeing crowd, but that's when Kochi finds her and gets her back to her feet. At the same time, a squadron of tanks opens fire on Godzilla from a nearby government building, and he responds by hitting them with a devastating attack from his heat ray. The explosion is so powerful that it sends a shockwave through the streets like a nuclear blast, destroying everything for miles around. At the last second, Noriko shoves Kochi into an alleyway where he's protected from the blast, but the woman herself is lost in the whirlwind of dust and debris. Well, that was entirely avoidable. There's just some things in life that you just can't control, like Godzilla showing up to crash the party during your morning commute. But that doesn't mean that you just give up and let yourself get blasted back to Timbuktu. I'm sorry to say it, but Noriko and Kochi, you both f***ed up. Let's start with you, Noriko. Great job surviving that train attack, but I want to introduce you to this crazy concept called diving approximately 5 feet to your right. Like, hello, did you suddenly lose all ability to move your damn legs the minute that Godzilla started charging his laser? Why the hell did you two morons even stop running in the first place? You see this giant lizard that just destroyed half of the city starts sprouting glowing spines out of his back, and you think to yourself, you know what, I better stick around to see how this plays out. No. Immediately run for your life, you absolute fool. And don't stop until you're on the other side of the country from this atomic abomination. Come to think of it, after cheating death the first time, why on Godzilla's green earth would you climb out of the canal only to walk directly back into his path? I get that he can cover ground faster than you can, but wouldn't you just make a judgment call about what direction he's going in and, oh, I don't know, maybe run in the opposite fucking direction? You've got a kid at home, lady. You gotta do better than that. And as for you, Kochi, that plot armor is somehow simultaneously your greatest blessing and biggest curse. But I guess it doesn't carry over to your situationship, huh? You knew Godzilla was out there, and yeah, you might not have been able to warn the public, but you could definitely have at least told Noriko to call out of work for the next few days, you know, with there being a giant monster on the loose and all. At least you're still alive to get some revenge. But first, you're going to have to break the poor news to Akiko that she now has 2 mothers who've been vaporized before her 5th birthday. That's rough, and I hate to kick you both while you're down, but Noriko and Kochi, you f***ed up. Back at home, things aren't looking too good for Kochi here. He can't find a way to break the news to Akiko, and he's just starting to slip back into his old thoughts of survivor's guilt even worse than before. Just when he's finally lost all hope, Doc comes and tells him about a plan being hatched by private citizens to take Godzilla down for good, and Kochi enthusiastically agrees to join, seeing this as his last chance to set things right. Kochi, Doc, the captain, and the kid arrive at the meeting the next day, where they see that almost everyone there served in the Japanese Navy. Once everyone is assembled, former Captain Tatsuo Hata takes the floor, explaining that if they're going to defeat Godzilla, then they're going to have to do it on their own. But good old Doc here has a plan. Since Godzilla's regenerative abilities cancel out even their most heavy artillery, Doc here activated all 100% of his brain to come up with a plan that uses the most powerful weapon of all: bubbles. Using a wooden model, he demonstrates how, by surrounding Godzilla with Freon bubbles, that they can force him to sink to the bottom of the ocean. He's chosen the nearby Sagami Trench as the location of their attack, hoping that a sudden drop to such an extreme depth will crush Godzilla under the pressure. A few of the men question whether Godzilla might survive the drop, and Doc admits that he can't guarantee it will work, but that's why he's come up with a plan B. After sinking Godzilla to the bottom of the trench, they'll inflate a bunch of giant balloons to send him rocketing back up to the surface. The idea is that if the increase in pressure doesn't kill him, then the rapid decompression on the way back up will essentially cause him to explode from the inside. With the plan laid out, Captain Hata gives a rousing speech to the crowd, saying that the safety of the entire country is in their hands. After a moment, one man speaks up, saying that he's tired of risking his life, and Hata gives everyone who agrees with him permission to walk out now without anyone judging them. As for those who decide to stay, they're absolutely gassed up to take the fight to Godzilla for once, and Hata solemnly thanks them all for their bravery. That night, Doc explains that they're going to use an underwater speaker playing recordings of Godzilla's roar to think them that there's another creature challenging his territory, and hopefully lure him into a position over the trench. Unsure that it will actually work, Kochi suggests that if they can find him another fighter plane, then he can aggro Godzilla into following him as a backup plan. Well, not only does Doc find him a plane, but this baby is a borderline UFO. Doc introduces Kochi to his new whip, the J-7W Shinden, a prototype short-range fighter that was developed near the end of the war with a top speed pushing almost 500 miles per hour and the agility to match. There's just one problem: the thing can't actually fly. Yet. They need a mechanic, and Kochi says that he knows just the guy. For his plan to work, Kochi must seek out the assistance of his biggest hater, the mechanic Tachibana, but tracking him down isn't easy. After hitting nothing but dead ends, he goes around handing out pamphlets that blame Tachibana for the deaths at the airbase. And sure enough, the man decides to pay him a visit, but it's less of a friendly reunion and more like a sudden attack from behind with a wooden stick. Tachibana isn't overly enthusiastic about hearing him out, that is, until he hears what Kochi has planned. He remembers from the attack on the boats that Godzilla can be damaged from the inside, and says that he wants Tachibana to load the plane with more things that go boom, so that he can DoorDash them straight into Godzilla's mouth. Okay, this is actually a pretty interesting plan, but both sides are making a few crucial mistakes. For Doc, using the rapid changes in pressure against him is a brilliant idea, but what's to stop Godzilla from just breaking their shit when they try to wrap him up? And as for Kochi, if he goes through with his plan, then poor Akiko is gonna grow up a double orphan, and that's just sad, man. At the meeting, Kochi should have spoken up about his idea for feeding Godzilla an explosive sandwich and let Doc see if he could incorporate that plan somehow. Clearly, they're looking for any ideas out there if the best plan that they could come up with was killing Godzilla with bubbles and balloons. I mean, are we throwing a Chuck E. Cheese birthday party here, or trying to take out a 150-foot tall lizard anyway? They could still go with the explosive boat idea, or any of the other solutions that we mentioned before, but Mr. Secret Plan over here won't be happy until he's Godzilla food, I guess. And he's putting the entire team at risk because of it. They all need to be on the same page if they're going to get this done, because otherwise they can pretty much kiss Miss Tokyo goodbye. And Godzilla isn't about to wait for them to get a head start. Tachibana gets to work on the plane, and not a moment too soon, because later that night they receive an urgent warning that Godzilla is on his way. Projecting out his current path, Doc estimates that he's headed straight for Tokyo, and should reach the Sagami Trench by 11 a.m. the next day, giving them just over 12 hours to get ready. The kid here is excited for another chance at beating Godzilla, but the captain and the doc tell him that this time he's going to stay behind on shore, saying that it's for his own safety, despite him begging them to let him come along. Early in the morning, Kochi quietly gets up, leaves a message for Sumiko in bed with Akiko, and goes down to the hangar fully expecting to never return home again. Meanwhile, out on the water, scouting teams pick up signs of Godzilla entering the area, and the decoy ship is sent to lure him out to Sagami Bay. At the docks, the men rush to board their boats, when all of a sudden, the front half of the decoy ship is catapulted hundreds of feet through the air and into a nearby building. To their surprise, Godzilla is already there. And now their only hope of getting this plan right lies with Kochi. The pilot sets off, soaring high above the countryside, where he spots the massive creature making his way towards the city, and circles around to open fire on him with the plane's machine guns, narrowly dodging a strike from the monster's tail. The plan works, and Godzilla turns to follow him back out to sea, where Doc and the others are waiting for the second phase to begin. They start out by launching 2 decoy ships directly into Godzilla's path, tricking him into using up a blast of his atomic breath on the empty boats. While he has to recharge, Captain Hata orders the remaining 2 boats to begin their attack, charging full speed ahead towards Godzilla as they tow the lines of Freon gas canisters behind them. The 2 ships nearby collide as they reach the apex of their turn, but they're able to narrowly pass each other and head back into the opposite direction, successfully wrapping Godzilla in the cable. The captain activates the Freon canisters just in time, and Godzilla plummets down nearly 1,600 meters to the bottom of the trench. But a violent tug on the cables shows that he isn't finished yet. Now Doc activates Plan B, irritating the ring of giant balloons and forcing Godzilla to rise back up to the surface. But suddenly, everything stops, and they realize that he's bitten straight through the flotation devices. In a last-ditch effort, Captain Hata orders both ships to pull Godzilla up using their cranes, but he's just too heavy for it to work. And for a moment, it looks like their plan is dead in the water. Just then, they hear an announcement over the radio. It's the kid, and he's brought with him an army of tugboats from other civilians who wanted to do their part. With the added power of the tugboats, they're finally able to drag Godzilla back to the surface. But although he's clearly injured, furious, Godzilla charges up his heat ray, ready to destroy everything in sight. When, at the last possible moment, Kochi circles back for his final pass, flying his plane directly into Godzilla's mouth. Just before impact, Kochi activates his ejector seat, secretly installed for him by his arch-enemy Tachibana, who after all this time was able to forgive Kochi and decided that he deserved a second chance at life. The plane explodes, blowing Godzilla's entire skull to pieces, as the creature disintegrates from the inside out and tumbles into the sea. And Kochi parachutes down to safety, having finally redeemed himself and put an end to the monster once and for all. At the docks, the men are given a hero's welcome, but Kochi's story isn't finished just yet. From out of the crowd, Sumiko arrives with a letter that she'd just received hours after he'd left, and what it says changes everything. With Akiko in his arms, Kochi rushes to a hospital near Ginza, where they find Noriko still alive, and the 3 of them can finally be a family once again. For now, Kochi's war is finally over, but as pieces of Godzilla drift to the bottom of the sea, they slowly begin to reform, proving that one day, the monster will return. If you've made it this far, congratulations. You've just made it through the How to Beat episode of the best Godzilla movie ever made. At least I think so. Godzilla -1, it was fun as hell to put together. Thanks to the editors for snapping this one up quick, fast like that. If you liked this video, like and subscribe, and check out the How to Beat playlist for more videos just like this one. I'm the guy. I'll see you in the next episode, and have a damn good day.